We've had our histories reframed and rewritten. It's been done on individuals. When I was growing up, Winston Churchill was one of our great national heroes. For most of us in the general public, he still is. But everything in the public square, written by academics and pumped out in the media, has become negative. To the extent that the crowds in London have repeatedly attacked Winston Churchill's statue. It's the same thing here in America with the Founding Fathers. Now you may say that there was a couple of generations ago, there was too simple a story told about America's Founding Fathers, that we didn't know enough about them, that it wasn't well known enough about their involvement with slavery, for instance. You could say that, and there would be some justice in that. But there is no justice in simply saying Thomas Jefferson was a racist and therefore there's nothing to gain from him, and that you must pull down all likenesses of him. And this isn't an abstract fringe thing. I mean, the city we're sitting in, New York City, the legislative chamber in this city, and the New York City Council, had a statue of Jefferson until November last year, when by order of the council, by vote of the council, it was pulled down, crated up, and wheeled out of a back door because the council in New York said Thomas Jefferson no longer represents our values. Well, I'm sorry, but if you think that the Founding Fathers can be discarded, and Abraham Lincoln can be discarded, and everyone else can be discarded from American history, and you're now going to wing it from here on in, you've got another thing coming. To take away all of that, and what actually have you got left? Again, do this to any other peoples and see what the results would be. So it's a war on the West's history, its traditions, all of its philosophical and religious traditions are being torn down, torn away at, and this same remorseless movement has now run right through the arts as well, so that Shakespeare and other great figures of literature are now argued to be out of date, anachronistic. They accused Shakespeare of using the language of light and darkness, and that this was highly racialized language, therefore problematic, and therefore Shakespeare was no longer useful. Again, take away Shakespeare, take away all of the canon of Western literature, and what have you got? Take away all of the music by saying that it's racist. And again, it's not hypothetical. They've done it with every single figure from the arts. They're still doing it. It's an amazing thing to watch in real time. It's a form of cultural revolution. And I think that it's been gotten away with far too easily to date.
If you haven't subscribed already, you can now try a 14-day free trial and get access to all of our deep dive interviews, documentaries, and exclusive content on Epoch TV, from American thought leaders to The Larry Elder Show. Just go to ept.ms/free-trial-yan. When I was reading your book, I'm reading a book called War Without Rules, which is basically a reader done by Robert Spalding, who studied this. You could think of it like a war manual called Unrestricted Warfare, written by two Chinese colonels in 1999. And essentially what they lay out is the battle plan for the Chinese Communist Party to take over the world through unconventional military means, things we wouldn't think of as war. As I was reading your book, I couldn't help think all these methods that these two colonels that China has since implemented from their advice are very much the types of things that are being done here.
Yeah, well, I mean, quite often people say to me, how has this happened? Who's pushing it? And, the answer is it's both self-inflicted and very willingly inflicted upon us. It's a nascent movement that is used now by all of the West's foes geostrategically and elsewhere, competitors as well, let us say. There's a moment, as you know, in the book where I take a step back and say, what's the rest of the world doing whilst we're doing this? because for a lot of Americans in particular, a lot of Westerners, we're myopic these days. We don't really look beyond our own borders. We don't look very far, and we're not that interested, and we don't really know. And young people in particular coming out of college don't really know. And the rest of the world is not doing this, you know. I mean, I give all the examples of Chinese racism. I mean, racism against white people, against black people and others. This sadly exists in China as in other societies. But when China stands up at the Human Rights Council and talks about racism and condemns it, clearly doesn't mean it. I mean, it's totally insincere.
Well, unquestionably, we have the worst form of racism, which
Right.
is, eradication of a
exactly.
racial group.
So this is one of the examples I give, as you know, is what happened at the United Nations in the first months of the present administration. The American ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, herself a black American, very accomplished, says in her remarks on UN International Day Against Racism, gives a speech about how racist America is. She talks about the death of George Floyd. She talks about what then was claimed by her and others to be a racist incident, which very clearly wasn't, which was the spa incident that happened when this lunatic shot up a spa with a number of women in it, and people claimed immediately it was a sign of racism, and it seems not to be. He had other reasons to do this dreadful act. But the point is that Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, even on an unproven case, a sort of fresh case, said it was another example of American racism. She does all of this at the UN, and then at the end of her remarks says, there's also other racism in the world, and we must remember what, is happening with the Rohingya in Myanmar and with the Uyghurs in China. Well, who's the next person up on the floor but the Chinese ambassador to the United Nations, who says, the American representative has appeared today and done something unparalleled in the history of the United Nations. She has come to confess her nation's guilt and her nation's racism. And then she has attacked China. How dare she? Because she is guilty in her own rights, because her country is guilty, they have no right to lecture the Chinese people. Like, what an own goal. What an own goal by America. And that isn't to say that you have to lie about, nobody should lie about their president, but to misrepresent it, as Linda Thomas Greenfield did at the United Nations that day, and then leave the goal open for a regime that is actually carrying out, as you say, the world's worst current form of racist oppression, is just a sign of the wild ignorance that is going on in the West at the moment. At the highest levels, we are not merely talking anymore about something that comes out from a few campus radicals or a few weird fringe far-left groups. We are talking about government after government sucking this up and spouting it back out to its peoples.